you write these devastating stories, and yet there's this hope and optimism that permeates your work.
He was so viscerally shocked and upset. He said, "Wally, you bitch motherfucker!" Literary criticism.
Okay, what do you think is more gutting, the ending of this novel or the ending of She's Come Undone? Hi, I'm Marysue Rucci. I'm the publisher of Scrivener and editor of The River is Waiting by Wally Lamb. Wally Lamb has joined us here in the studio, and Wally is the #1 New York Times bestselling author, and he is also a 3-time Oprah Book Club selectee. It's thrilling to be here with you, Wally. Thrilling to be able to talk about the Oprah selection.
So good to see you again, Marysue.
We're going to dive right in. I got to tell you, I remember exactly where I was when I read She's Come Undone, and it devastated me. I mean, it was in 1992. I know exactly where I was. I was in Oregon, and I kept hearing about this novel, and I thought, I wasn't buying hardcover novels. I was just out of college, and I was very, very poor. And everyone said, you have to. And I did. I bought the novel, and it absolutely slayed me because I felt like Dolores Price was me. I knew her. And then I realized that it was a man who had written it, and I couldn't believe it. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like having your debut novel be so extraordinarily successful?
Yes. The novel started with a voice. It was the day that our first son was born, which was May 25th, 1981. And it was Memorial Day weekend, and I had been up all night in the delivery room with my wife, and Jared emerged, and all the fingers and toes were intact and so forth. So I went home to take a shower, and I was going to call all the relatives. And a voice, I had not written any fiction before that, and didn't know that I had a desire to do that. But I heard a voice in my head saying, "The dork just left me. Good riddance." And I didn't know what it was, but I jotted it down when I got out of the shower, and then I found it about 2 months later, and I sat down and started to write what I thought was a short story, and then it kept growing and growing and growing. And I was working with a teacher at the time who said, "Well," she said, "maybe you're trying to tell yourself you want to write a novel." And I said, "Oh, I don't know how to do that. No, forget it." But then 9 years later, it was a novel. And so when it was published, I mean, I just thought I was kind of kidding myself that it wouldn't get published, but I love that character so much, and I was worried about her. I felt very parental toward her, even though I was writing as if I were she. And then it was published. I was thrilled with that. And it had its nice, quiet life, like, from 1992 to 1997. It was wonderful. And I didn't think it was, going to light any, firecrackers or anything. But that summer of 1992, I got a call, and the woman at the other end said, "Is this Wally?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "What are you doing, Wally?" I said, "Well, I'm doing laundry." And she laughed. And I said, "Who is this?" And she said, "This is Oprah Winfrey." And I'm thinking to myself, "Yeah, right. You're Oprah Winfrey, and I'm, I don't know, Geraldo Rivera or somebody." Anyway, it really was she. And she did not have a book club back then. But she said she was an avid reader, and when she reads a book that she likes, she tries to track down the author to say thanks. And I'm like, no problem. And I was just thrilled, but also kind of speechless. And then 5 years later, 1997, she calls back, and the first thing she said, "Well, so Wally, are you still doing the laundry?" And we laughed, and she said that she had started this book club. I was kind of marginally aware of it, but I I didn't think that she would remember a book that, she had read 5 years ago. Anyway, it was, I think, the third book in her book club selections. And then it just sort of, she launched it into the stratosphere when she held it up and suggested that people should read this book. So, yeah, it was quite a wild ride.
Yeah. And so she called again this year. And how did that go?
Well, again, she was just as she shocked me just as much. And in the meantime, she had chosen a second book of mine. I Know This Much Is True. Mm-hmm. And so she said, "Wow, Wally, it's been a long time since we talked." And she said, "Well, I've read the book." She said, and it brought me right back to something that I did a show on, which was these backover accidents. And she said, one of the guests was a grandmother and of a child victim, and she said that has stayed with me. So I went into your novel with that memory, and she said, "That's quite a book you wrote." And so we just had a really nice conversation.
Let us talk about, what the inspiration was for this book.
I'm not sure I would call it an inspiration, but the story got jump-started by a kind of upsetting small article I saw in the newspaper about something called backover accidents. And those are those horrible accidents, usually involving a parent and a toddler, where the parent doesn't realize the toddler is behind the car, and the car is put in reverse, and the child is backed over, is run over. And the reason that it really unnerved me is that at the time I had a 3-year-old grandson and an infant granddaughter, and my son, who was their father, did not have a backup camera in his older car. And so I thought about how devastating that would be for any parent, and that's where it began.
Well, I have to say, you write these devastating stories, and yet there's still some transcendence. There's this hope and optimism that permeates your work. So how do you write your way through these really, really dark, the dark plots and the obviously this, I Know This Much Is True. There's mental illness in this book. There's addiction and mental illness, and obviously grief. So how do you stay your, congenial self?
Well, I would say, first of all, I'm a glass half full guy. Mm-hmm. I like to hold on to the hope for people. But when I'm writing, I have no idea where it's going to go. Oh. I'm not one of these writers who can, have an outline and write toward an ending that I have somehow, figured out. And so I have to keep showing up at the desk mm-hmm. To find out what the next installment is going to be of this story that I'm building. So it's kind of like flying the plane and building it at the same time. And I'm hopeful for these characters who are put into these, devastating situations. But I have no idea if they're going to come out okay in the end.
So the ending of this novel surprised you? You didn't know where it was going when you started it?
No, I did not.
Wow.
No. I started it. It took me about almost 7 years to write, okay. And I started it in 2017, I think, mm-hmm. And that was before there was a COVID-19 right. pandemic, and so I'm writing along, through those years, and all of a sudden I realized, okay, so my character was sent to prison in 2017, so and he's there on a 3-year sentence. So he would go running right into COVID at the prison. Mm-hmm. And so that's when I started, researching and looking at, the voices of people who had, prisoners who had survived COVID, and, and talking about some of the people who they knew who had not.
Right.
And that's, so it went that way.
That's so interesting. So you had, but you knew he was going to go to prison, right?
Yes, I knew that from pretty much right from the start.
From the beginning. And you have done work in prisons, so you had a familiarity. Did you also, was this modeled at all on a prison? I mean, this is all fiction, of course, but was this modeled on the prison in which you worked?
To some extent. I worked I did volunteer work for about 20 years at the York Correctional Institution, and that is a women's prison in Niantic, Connecticut. It's the only state prison for women in Connecticut. And so I got to hear and see and listen to and react to the everyday of prison life, how, the crushing boredom and the, in some ways the misuse of power by the guards and so forth. So so little by little, I got a degree, I should say, in as far as life in prison.
Right.
And when that Corby happens to Corby, I kind of knew the lay of the land that I could write about.
I was so in awe of you as a writer even before I met you. And then, of course, I had the opportunity during COVID. You changed agents and you changed publishing houses, and your agent he called me and said, "What do you think about Wally Lamb?" And I fainted. And then when I picked myself up off the ground and said, "Oh, yes, I love Wally Lamb. I love Wally Lamb." But I was so nervous to meet you. So you had me audition.
I don't think of it that way. I think I was the auditioneer.
I don't know. But how do you think of it?
Well, I had been, as you say, I had left my previous publisher, and I switched agents and had just started working with the amazing Bill Clegg.
Yes.
And he called up and he said, "I think I've got a good match for you." Now, in the meantime, I had been writing this book for about a couple of years without a book contract, without a publisher,
Right.
and that was okay. It was kind of freeing for a while, but then I started to get nervous that nobody was going to want to publish me anymore, and so I was very nervous driving to New Canaan and having lunch with you. And you were pointing out, I remember the family barbershop,
That's
which
right.
was across from where we were having lunch and so forth. And but what was exciting to me, I didn't know of your esteemed reputation. I just knew that I liked you immediately and felt relaxed, felt comfortable. And so I think shortly after that, we signed an agreement, and you became my editor. And I was going to be writing for your eponymously named Marysue Rucci books.
Yes, that's right. But yeah, when I said my grandfather, the town is very Tony, but my grandfather immigrated from Italy and was the barber in town and ended up owning the barber shop. He only had an education, I think, age 13. And when I said that, you said, "Oh, a paisan."
Yeah. My maternal grandparents immigrated from Sicily and Calabria.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, so we have
and
that
were
in
matched
common.
for marriage.
Yeah. So what was the hardest thing about writing this book? And do you want to talk about the editorial process? Because I was so nervous about the editorial process because you had obviously been with the same editor for a very long time. And that's always a challenge with a new person.
Mm-hmm. Well, she had, I had worked with her, I think, for 3 books. And her editing was, she edited, it was very, very gentle and very nuanced. And she would mostly just ask me questions. And then I would think about, how I would answer that. And that sometimes gave me direction for fixing things. And then you edit in a very different style, and you are very hands-on, which I appreciated. I got very excited with that, with the dynamic that we created.
Okay.
So one of the things that I had started to write was a two-person voice. Corby's voice,
That's
the
right.
main character, and his wife's voice, who has to react to this terrible tragedy and react to him now that he has caused the tragedy and so forth. And you were the one who said, no, this should come out from one voice. If you want to reveal Emily, do it through his eyes. And my initial reaction to that was I was kind of whiny, saying, "But I wrote so many pages of it," in her voice. But it was very quickly after that I saw, oh, that is really wise. To give the story to him and go on his journey rather than two separate journeys toward the as you work toward the end. So that's one of the and only one of them that I've been very grateful for. Also, I had been an English teacher for 25 years, and so I was a little put out sometimes when you would tell me, where to put the apostrophe and that kind of stuff. I mean, your editing was global and also very detailed, and I was grateful for all of it. And I really am looking forward to if you're up for it. Let's do another.
Let's do it again.
Another combination.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. I love that. Well, thank you for saying that. I always wanted to say, and I hope I said this. This is your book.
Yep.
This is just an idea, and let's see how it works. And I think once that happened, the flow of the novel was to me so propulsive. Like because the back and forth can be a nice plot device, but sometimes it just becomes, distracting because you're on two planes. And in this case, I just felt like we were I felt so much empathy for Corby. You do that so well, and it's so immersive that I just didn't. I wanted that claustrophobia. I wanted the reader to feel as incarcerated, as frustrated, as inspired as he is. I mean, his evolution is extraordinary.
Well, and also I came to see after you suggested that, and I went with it. I began to see how really imprisoning that structure that I'd set up was, because a chapter in Corby's voice, a chapter in Emily's voice, back to Corby, back to Emily, and so forth. And I felt more, structurally limited. Okay, now I have to write an Emily chapter.
Right.
So you freed me from that,
Oh,
and I saw the wisdom of that.
Oh, good. Well, thank you. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for being up for it.
Well, I work in writers groups, and I always, when I started writing, I immediately went into work with other writers. Very informal. We meet once every couple of weeks. It's been a long, we've been together for a long time now. We have a meal. Whoever's hosting, makes a meal, and then we eat, and then we discuss whoever has work. And sometimes when people are discussing my work, I don't partake of the conversation at all. I just want to be listening and taking notes as feverishly as possible. And lots of times when somebody says something, my first reaction is like, I'm writing it down, but I'm thinking to myself, yeah, what do you know? And then 2 days later, when the discussion has cooled off, I think to myself, oh, that's exactly what I needed to hear. So I love that process. And I don't think I could have written the books that I have without the help of other writers and feedback. Not only getting it, receiving feedback, but giving it. Because if you can prescribe for somebody else's work, you've learned something about your own work too.
How about Chris, your wife? Is she an early reader?
Yes, she usually is, and she doesn't have all the buzzwords of somebody who's been in an MFA program. But my wife she's very truthful, and when she hears a false note, she's not afraid to tell me. I remember with She's Come Undone, when I was in the last chapter, we were going to go to the mall, and I forget what we were looking for. I don't know, a mattress or something. And so I parked at the mall. It's pouring rain, and I said, before we go in, can I read you the final chapter? And she said, yeah, sure. So I read the chapter, and at the end of the chapter, the two of us are sobbing like a couple of idiots in the mall parking lot. So yeah, she's always been a really very loyal person who is not afraid to tell me the truth about a lot of things, not just writing.
I need to zero in on this. You're in the car at the mall, and someone's reading aloud. Who's reading it aloud?
I'm reading it to her.
Oh, Wally, that is quite an image.
Yeah, well, and I think I broke down a couple of times in the writing.
I remember that ending being absolutely gutting.
Yeah.
It gutted me. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. He says thank you. Okay, what do you think is more gutting? The ending of this novel or the ending of She's Come Undone?
The ending of this one.
Yeah, I agree.
In my writers group, a good friend of mine, John, he's a poet, and but he's really, when you work with the same characters for several years, people get to know them and root for them and so forth.
Yeah.
He was so viscerally shocked and upset. He said, "Wally, you bitch motherfucker." So I guess that's probably a form of, literary criticism too.
That's what I said too, but you just didn't hear me.
I've never heard you use words like that.
Good. My mom, did you hear that? Yeah. So no, I mean, I was so upset, so distraught at the ending of this book. I called Bill and I said, I can't do it. I can't handle it. It can't end this way. And he said, Marysue, it's a Wally Lamb book. And I said, yeah, I came around.
That's the cool thing about writing. It's usually it's grunt work. It's hard. You hate it because you're stuck or something. But every once in a while, things just come, and it's like a little movie goes on in your head, and or an image that you hadn't predicted. I love the unpredictable part of writing, where I think it's going one way, and then the writing shows me, no, we're not going there. We're going this way.
I just want to go back to She's Come Undone, and the fact that it was reissued a couple of years ago. It was also published within the Simon Schuster family.
Yeah.
We're putting the original jacket back on it.
I'm so glad to hear that.
Me too. I love that jacket. But why do you think it's so resonant, that it still resonates with audiences today? I mean, people are still discovering this novel.
Yeah, I don't have a great answer for that. Other than it is somebody who, because she's telling her story to a reader, she is taking that reader in her confidence and showing her vulnerability in many ways, and people respond to that. Not only people who are obese like Dolores is, but people plug in their own vulnerabilities into that story. I still get letters about that novel.
Wow.
In the early years, and then particularly when Oprah chose it for her book club, I have in my storage place, I have these plastic bins, and they're about this high, and they're filled with letters about She's Come Undone from people, some of whom are saying, I don't know why she got to me, but she got to me. Mm-hmm. And my favorite letter, I have the bins for the the really nice letters, but not too unusual. And then I have a folder of the really special letters, the ones that bring me to tears. One of them, probably my favorite, was from a kid named David, and he wrote to tell me that he was in a mental hospital, and he was there because he was a cutter, and was self-mutilating a lot. And he said he was an avid reader, and he says, I'm 24, but I'm still so immature that when I read a book that I like, I invite the character to a dinner party I'm having. And he said, I want to invite Dolores to the dinner party.
Wow.
And then the letter was poignant and very funny too, and brought tears to my eyes. And he said at the end, and this is during George Bush's, the first George Bush's presidency,
okay,
when he wrote this. And if you remember, Barbara Bush had a dog named Millie, and she published a book in Millie's voice, right? And it became a bestseller. And so he says, at the end paragraph, he said, I don't, and this was before Oprah, and he says, I thought this was going to be a bestseller. And he says, doesn't it piss you off when people, buy a book by Millie the dog when they could have been meeting Dolores? And then he ends with, fuck them. Shalom, David. And I was so moved by this letter that I tracked him down. And this is in the days before HIPAA laws. And so I called up the institution where he said he had been. And they said, oh, yeah, that's, and they gave me his name and the town that he lived in. And I called up information. Remember information?
Oh, yeah.
And I said, I need this last name. Anybody who lives in that town with that last name. And I think I had like 9 numbers to call. First one, who answers but David. And he was kind of shocked, but I said, your letter meant so much to me that I wanted to send you a signed book. So anyway, we stayed in touch. He would write letters, always with these funny, weird drawings on the envelopes and so forth. And over the years, I would say, David, you have a gift for writing. You should write something on your own. And then miraculously, he got better, and he wrote that book called Sharp. It was published, and we're still very much in touch.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's such a great story.
But why would he, in terms of your question,
why does it resonate with him?
Why does this overweight character resonate with a guy who cuts himself? You know? And
you get to the heart of vulnerability, and I do think you're right. People project their own, shames and grief and pain into your characters, and it's cathartic. So, Wally, I am so proud and honored to have been your editor on The River is Waiting. We are so excited to publish it. And would you do the honor of a reading from the novel, please?
Oh, sure.
Okay,
that would
great.
be my pleasure. I have picked out a short scene that happens on pages. It's about a page and a half. It's pages 130 and 131.
I'm going to read along.
And I'll just read it.
Okay.
Finally, my attorney says, there can be no greater punishment for Corbin Ledbetter to endure than getting out of bed every day for the rest of his life, having to face the fact that he's responsible for his son's death and the heartbreaking loss that he has inflicted on his loved ones, especially his wife Emily and the boy's sister. I think it's impossible for us to imagine the degree of guilt and shame and remorse that is and will be this man's daily burden. Your Honor, don't you think that is prison enough? She had instructed me to look at Judge Palazzolo when she said this, and if I had any tears left, to shed them too. Unable to do either, I bowed my head and stared at the floor. The prosecutor, Reitland, could have asked for the maximum of 10 years in prison. Instead, she has asked for 6. Attorney Dixon has requested a suspension of my entire sentence, followed by 3 years of probation and community service. Judge Palazzolo says she needs a few minutes of silent deliberation before she renders her decision. All rise, the bailiff calls as she stands and heads, slump-shouldered, back to her chambers. While we wait, Dixon speaks some hollow words of encouragement. I thank her, try to smile, and ask her what happened to her pink hair that she was wearing the first time we met. Gone with the wind, she says. My wife hated it. After that, we two wait in silence. All rise! Judge Palazzolo speaks more to the gallery than to me. In some cases, sentencing someone for a crime that's been committed is not a difficult decision to make. Cut and dried, you might say. You follow the guidelines. But cases like this one are more complex, more difficult. They're the ones that can keep you up at night, before and after you render your decision. Then she turns to me. Mr. Ledbetter, I sympathize with you and your family. You have all had to endure an unfathomable loss. Nevertheless, I cannot unhear Attorney Reitland's argument that in order for your little boy to have the justice to which he's entitled, the state must hold you accountable for the tragedy that resulted from your having broken the law. That said, I am not granting the prosecutor her request that you serve 6 years in prison. My decision is that you are to be incarcerated for a period of 5 years, suspended after 3. I will not mandate your attendance at 12-step meetings during your incarceration. I believe recovery from addiction must be self-motivated, not ordered by the state. That said, I sincerely hope that this is something you will want to continue to work on for yourself and your family. Good luck, Mr. Ledbetter. I wish you well. And with that, she gavels my case to a close and exits the courtroom. 2 court sheriffs approach with cuffs and shackles. I look over my shoulder at Emily, hoping to make eye contact, but she's already heading for the exit with her mother. From there, I look over at my parents, still seated. My mother is glum but stoic. Dad is in tears. Who would have thought that? And there, behind them, is Dr. Patel, who has come after all. Her hands are clasped in front of her, and when she sees that I have spotted her, she offers me the gift of a compassionate smile. Outside, I squint in the bright summer sunshine. I'm boosted up and into the back of a transport van. A few minutes later, I'm on my way to Yates Correctional Institution, where I will spend the next 36 months of my life.
It's beautiful. Really beautiful. It's such a compelling, propulsive, gorgeous novel, Wally. Thank you so much for joining us on The Right Reasons.
I would not have said no.